Hello, and welcome to day 39 of the 100-day challenge. I'm working on my comic book on Webtoons, Dinosaur Man, and things are looking pretty good. We're going to be working on this panel today, like we did yesterday, and try to bring it to fruition. As of today, we've got 43 subscribers. The comic has had 550 views and is maintaining a solid 9.80 score on the rankings. I want to thank everybody who's been commenting, and yeah, so let's get right down to it and get into working on this episode 4 piece. Greetings, Varian, and everybody out there watching on your Roku on the Indie Vault network. Of course, anybody tuning in on YouTube, anybody coming in off of the link I shared on my page, I appreciate you and I welcome you and thank you for hanging out. So, to get started here, we're going to hide all of my sketch drawing and start breaking up into this panel 4 here. So, you can see I've been trying to reorganize my panels a little bit better. Panel 1, panel 2, keeping everything inside of the folders, and then trying to have named layers properly. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and just dig right into it here. I'm going to start with the background. And this will be my color layer. And we'll just get into making this look pretty good. So, now one of the things I need to maintain here is there's been a bit of a passage of time, and it's already kind of been like a late afternoonish setting. If we go to the comic, take a look at the comic. We see the planet, we transition into what's kind of a midday sky. Still got a blue sky, but we're starting to get some pinks that would indicate, kind of sunset. But the terrain here, the soil, is browns and reds and pinks. So this is about as alien as I'm getting with what's going on in the terrain-wise here. So I'll maintain these blues and probably start to darken things up, because if we go to, let's see, here's chapter 2, episode 2. Try to get an idea of how much time has actually passed so that I know when to start making it into evening. So this whole accident and crash scene probably within 30 minutes or so. So I'm still safe to do kind of like the same color scheme. So I'll start with, get into my, let's see if I can find my cloud brush. There's my cloud brush. It's true, some planets may not have the traditional day-night cycle. I'll admit that I haven't exactly gotten that deep into the science behind the rotations around its particular star or setting of days and nights. But that is a very good point, Varian. We can always switch things up like that. Sorry to be starting a little bit late. I was at the Container Store, and it was a wonderful experience, except that I couldn't find everything I needed. I could not contain my enthusiasm. So, wah wah. Yeah, I know, right? But I mean, how much of the expanded universe was developed without, Lucas involved? Like all the good parts? I kid. Alright, so now we're getting a little bit of a haze there, and the clouds are looking pretty good, so I can go in and start working on. I'll merge those two down and then do the mountains. Now I was not, let's see, I wonder if it should contain it. Since I didn't contain my lines, these would kind of bleed through, but since I've got this box around everything, that should keep everything, yeah, so it just does that. That's better. I'll have to do a few manual ones. Get in there. So I'm using that sprayer, so it's not all, perfect. Right now, that is kind of what, well, not going to say how fun it is, but I thought it would, might be a little more interesting as for a video to take each panel from start to finish. So that's kind of the experiment that I'm doing right now, just taking each one start to finish. So with what we've got so far, I mean, I'm hoping it's making it for a more interesting video at least, seeing that progression. Now we'll get a little bit darker with our tones with this part here. There we go. I'm just going to kind of be painterly with this one. Oh, I haven't done a 24-hour comic jam in a long time, but I think I would love to do it again now that I'm doing Dinosaur Man. So, Varian, if you're up for it, I'll participate with you. Be cool to be able to set up shop at a local comic store and do it from, live stream the whole thing. That would be kind of cool. I would totally be down for that. I think that's, what, October? October 7th or something? Alright, I'll do a multiply layer. The last time I did one, it was murder, but I mean, I would do it for a show. I would definitely do 24-hour comic stream. So I'll just start dropping some shadows in. That's looking pretty nice. Now, if I take my blender, I can soften the edges up in the background so they'll be sharper coming closer. Now we're starting to kind of get a good sense of the way the background looks. And let's bring out this and really kind of shade in here more. These mountains are going to create a big canyon shadow. That's kind of nice. So we got, these mountains here blocking the light from behind, and it's kind of glowing here in the middle and starting to get cooler back here in the back. So that's pretty good. Let's see. Now if I start to go into the mountains, and I'm just laying in some, again, we got light coming in off of the mountains, so we'll be back shadowing the grooves in the rock. Then we'll start softening this up a bit. Now, to further make those disappear into the background, I'm going to go above my background drawing layer. Actually, you know what I can do instead? There's a couple of ways of doing it. Either you can lay color on top of your line art, or you can colorize your line art. So maybe what I'll do this time is I'll colorize the line art. I'll get a darker red. And what I've done is I've locked the pixels so I can only colorize what already has data. Now we remove that black line from those mountains and we're pushing everything back a little bit further into the atmosphere. And then we'll use that layer that I just created, go back to the cloud brush, maybe bring its opacity down and sample from my clouds, and then just kind of put an atmosphere over that. Maybe not too strong. We can always go back in and remove some, kind of lighten it up. Well, the color for the hi-fi color for comics, it's probably the best, most well-known tutorial book out there. So I would, of course, look into that. I know they updated it, and they did a Kickstarter for it probably 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, and it was, of course, pretty successful. So look into that. Honestly, just watching people do it, like what I'm doing right here, is probably the best way to go about it. Yeah, let's see. Let me put in a little more atmosphere over here. And maybe not. Maybe I want to go with a darker tone. Alright, so our background is starting to really come together. So I'll finish working on some of these other little pieces here, like the rocks and whatnot. Also, going back to the digital coloring, there's so many ways of doing it. Like, for example, I'm using Clip Studio, and a lot of people use this program, and there's specific tools it has that Photoshop doesn't, that allows you to do some other things, some things easier, and some things are kind of missing. Although with the newest version, that list keeps getting shorter and shorter of what's missing. I mean, I've almost completely eliminated Photoshop, except for I hate the text tool in Clip Studio. So I'll always go back to Adobe Illustrator to do text until, because you can't, unless it's somewhere that is not in any instructions, there's no way of doing the kerning or the leading so that you can space everything, you know, as a designer would space things. So you're just kind of stuck in whatever the default spacing is for the fonts. And I just don't like the organization either of the fonts. So that's why I still break everything up. Alright, so that little guy's kind of sticking out too much. add some more, bring in some more of these lavender colors to shadow some of the closer up crevices in the rocks. And we'll go ahead and give Dinosaur Man a bit of a shadow as well. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. The last thing I would think I would probably do is I'm just going to go into the regular color and grab one of these pinks and one of these little, let's see, where is it? There's a really good brush that I got. Yeah, this Frank F. I don't remember where I got it. I bought it off of somebody, I think on DeviantArt. But it's a good build-up. So if I come in and use it on these parts here, and then come in with the blender, I can subtly build up some highlights on those rocks. Let me go to a brighter pink. This blender, let me tell you, this is one of the things that made me fall in love with this program, because that's the one big thing that Photoshop is missing. It has the smear smudge tool, which maybe works okay, but it doesn't blend color like it should. So there. Now we have a nice respectable background. And I can go to my foreground elements. I'm going to turn that detail layer off. Click the magic little lighthouse, slide another color layer underneath of it, and start filling in the shades for my man Chet here, getting throttled. I don't think I'm using the right brown. Yeah, that's the right one. And there's a little bit of his blue skin peeking out from back there. Go ahead and turn that off. And I got the knives. Let's go ahead and address the knives. Let's give him some sort of a colorful, like these, maybe a colorful maroon handle, and a little bit of gold. Maybe for the, yeah, that's pretty cool. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to lock transparency on that and then just go in with my regular pen tool and start adding in the reflections and the shine and shimmer and all that. As you can see, I've got that layer above us kind of dipping in here, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of cleanup on that one. Alright, so he's got that now going for him. And again, I want to do what I was doing with this panel up here, where we've got warm yellow tones contrasted against these cool blues and lavenders. So we're going to do that again. This part here and this part here will be our warm blues. And then this part here we'll warm up a little bit more. It's not going to be as extreme, but it'll still kind of have that effect of separating and adding more depth into our work. So let me go to, there's our foreground guy right here. Colors, I'll do a multiply layer, and then we're going to do shading. Whether you use overlay or if you use multiply as a layer for your shadow elements, it's handy for a lot of things, especially if you use like neutral grays. You can pretty much just pick one color once. But I always like to have a tint of warm or cool with my colors. So that's why I primarily go down here in this bottom corner where you can't see because it's covered up by my banner, but there's all these lavender shades and ones that kind of go to a pinkish, and then some that are more bluish. And I find that those are more accurate for creating shadow, using as shadow colors. Oops, I left it open. Day for night photography, anybody? Okay, let's undo that. And undo that. There. Another thing I'm still using Photoshop for is that blur effect that we're going to use a little bit later on in this panel to really sell the idea of him being thrown up against this. There's not a really good way of achieving that in this program. And it's all pretty much because they lack a copy merged feature. So unless you're doing your artwork all in one layer and collapsing the whole thing, you can really only do the blurs on one specific layer at a time. Go ahead and give these a little bit of color. That looks pretty good. Alright, so now to achieve our effect, I'll create another layer and make it my color layer. Now let's go to foreground elements, and we'll pick that, and then I'm just going to use one single blue tone. Didn't close it. Alright, so now let's do that. Okay, so that gives me my blue tone, and now I can cool down these areas. Just like that. We could also do the opposite effect. We could cool off everything over here and warm it up here, and that's something we can play with. But for right now, I just want to make sure and get that separated. So even if I did decide to come in and change the color, for example, we could just do all reds. Not quite the same effect. So let's leave this like this for now, and then go in and work on getting Dinosaur Man ready. So I'll zoom in, and there's a few little flub ups here that I'll need to correct too. That's another thing that Photoshop is good for, is Clip Studio doesn't have those image correction things like for photos, and it really comes in handy if there's just like a little errant pixel that you need to move. The only other way to do it would be to just sample and do a layer above everything else and just kind of patch things together, which may or may not work out the way you would like it to. So I'm going to go ahead and get Dinosaur Man up and running here with some flesh tone. Then lock pixels and go in and do the oranger one. Alright, so now we can do some musculature. And here's where I'm going to use those more pinkish lavenders to do the shading on his musculature. And one of the problems you'll see that I'm having is that Dinosaur Man is very kind of a, well, his face is a prawn color, the reddish, pinkish red. And then the problem that I'm having is that with using that same color for the mountains, even though I've diffused it somewhat, it's still going to make reading his face frustrating. So we will have to address that. Alright, so if I go back to normal, and I'm going to put in the rest of the missing colors. Oh, come on. Oh, I locked pixels. That's and I'll just do individual teeth right there, and then just do one dark shade there for that part. And I'm going to soften some of these and finish that one and that one. Alright, so I'm going to bounce out a little bit now. He's not as bad as I originally thought, but I think if I add some orange to his face, that it will help things out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and pick out this orange here. That'll help pop that out just a little bit better than what it was. And clean up these teeth. I want to add some saliva later. And then we'll just go ahead and do multiply and put some shading on the tongue. It's going to be shaded from above and below. Come out of his mouth there. And we'll strengthen up our shadow underneath here. And yeah, that'll help pop things out even more. Get that collar colored. Alright, he's looking pretty good. Go ahead and have some fun here with, I'll use the knives layer. Just give it a slight bit of transparency. Actually, you know what? Instead of transparency on the layer, I'll do lower the opacity. Yeah, because that was my knife layer anyway. I don't want to do that. So that way I can do a little bit of a build up. We can have some highlights. And the spray, the way that the spittle is flying will help us to achieve like getting that flinging action, because I'll have to come in and do something to help that along. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a screen layer. I'm going to grab some of this pink and bring in some highlights, and that's also going to help him pop from the background. Like that. And even though our dude's getting thrown here into this, he's still going to need some sort of highlighting going on. So that'll help make him come out even more. So we'll just have a one side and a two side. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's see about doing that kind of you know how there's a big swish in comics to indicate something being thrown. Let's see what the best way is that we're going to do that. So I know I want it above my background and all the background colors. So between here and here. I'll go ahead and give it a label just so I know what it is. And then let's go in and let's see. We just want this kind of a action going on. So I'll try. Let's try something like this. I don't know if I like that, but we can play with it. And maybe once we get the blur going on, maybe it's the wrong color. We could try doing something like that too. We'll just kind of start colorizing it. I kind of like that better. And we'll fade it out a little bit more. And if I take that off, and I'll use my blend tool and just soften this edge. Yeah, I think once we get the so I want to do let's see, do something coming off of these pieces and chunks. Ah! Let's do that above everything else. And then let's do another. Turn on my details and go into screen here and just do by doing that highlight, that's going to bring that out a little bit more. And we'll clean this up a little bit. There, that's a nice clean panel border. All right, so this panel is done. This is where we're going to end it for today. What I'm going to need to do next is in Photoshop, after everything else is done, I'm going to add in that that blur to really make and sell this impact. And might try to do some other things too, but I'm going to need to play around with the layers. Just looking at this now, I could almost do like a starburst in between the foreground and the background. So there's our foreground. There's that. So here's our background starting here. So like, you know, like a burst, which they do have bursts in here. Flying debris, flash debris, magic flash. So, I mean, that's kind of extreme, and I don't like see if I can hide this a little bit. Yeah, that's one of my problems, is that I put the color on the wrong side. So if I was to do something like this first here, that ain't bad. Ain't bad either. Let's try to do a little blur on this. I like it. I don't know if you guys like it, but I kind of like it. I think it's a little more appropriate for what I'm doing here with my coloring style. I'm still going to need to do that the blur on the whole image in Photoshop. Cool. All right. So we'll go to File. We're going to save it. And please remember to share this YouTube channel. Subscribe. Click the bell for notifications. Make sure you're still subscribed. Then there's all these wonderful fun things like my Patreon. I just posted some sketches of some anime characters that I'm working on for my 8x10 series. You can see the sketch. You can only see the sketches and stuff on my Patreon. Instagram, Twitter is Hey Melby. Facebook is all that jazz. And I thank you guys very much for tuning in. And tomorrow is Thursday. I am not sure if I'll be able to do a show at the normal time because I have another engagement at school. I'm not sure what time that's getting done. So if time allows, even tonight, I might do a pre-record for tomorrow and go ahead and do one for Friday as well, so that way I'm covered in both accounts. Anyway, thanks again, and we will see you next time.